Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Excellence Pharma Academy for yet another session with Sachin Bodawala. I'm sure that you would have enjoyed his session on new KPIs for the field force in the new normal. So, welcome, Sachin. Thank you for taking time out.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anup. This is really a privilege.
So you've been with us earlier as well, right from on the editorial board since inception, as well as in the Digisom 2017. So what's it like to move from the offline platforms where you get to actually see people, meet people? As a trainer, I enjoyed that. Now I miss that energizing presence. What about you, talking to the laptop?
So I have 30 years of my career was in sales, highly active, actually interacting with both internal and external customers. And obviously, this is a different role where not only from the laptop, but when I look back actually and see this is quite a climb down from my hyperactive roles which I had in the earlier era. Having said that, actually, I really see this when I look at data, digital capabilities, and so on were integrated from a current format which I've been working on for the last 4 5 years. I see that what is dear to my heart and which is the field force, actually my team as I still call them, I really can add value to them. I can get them ready for the next world or the next era which is going to happen actually. So the new normal has just accentuated the process, but that is something which makes me privileged in that manner that I'm getting them ready for what is there going to happen tomorrow.
Great. It was wonderful to see your presentation because the entire focus was on the medical rep. Your very first slide was the daily functions of a medical rep, and so therefore the KPIs. And going forward now, the situation where we are in, and how his role has changed, and how the new KPIs and the need for a sensitive approach in handling the reps with a flexible kind of KPIs, understanding their situation. So it's really great to have sales leaders like you who have not lost touch with the ground and have the field force and the medical reps and the frontline managers at the heart of your decision making.
Yeah, that's certainly something which I also feel. I'm a humble representative of my sales team in the head office. I'm a little better paid sales rep.
That's very nice to hear that. I hope that our youngsters who are listening to you will be inspired despite the challenges, because field job is not a cakewalk and it has become more challenging now, and so they will take heart from your progress and be inspired to keep going. So Sachin, you have been through a variety of roles and responsibilities both in India and South Asia, and in the last 10 years you've done something incredible, starting a company from scratch and taking it all the way to become a 1,000 crore company. So how does it feel to be at this stage in your life?
In one word, gratified. When I obviously look at the diverse roles, gratified, lucky, let me put it like that, because it is not that I was possibly the only one who was competent or capable. I was a little more privileged and to be at the right place at the right time, and that helped me grow. I was also privileged to join an organization like BI at a stage when it was evolving or growing, and the 10 crore to 1,000 crore journey when you becoming a part of, you're humbled by what the whole entire team has been capable of doing. So it's great privilege to be here.
Great, wonderful to hear that. So looking back, from the time lockdown happened, a few organizations have fared well even during the crisis and kept growing as well, including your own company. So, our audience will be keen to understand your perspectives on what made the difference. Maybe a few Salesforce markers will be insightful.
So the answer to this is not exactly that we prepared post COVID. And when I'm saying we, I'm talking about not only BI as a company, but many other organizations in a similar frame of mind would have prepared only for COVID. COVID happened and shocked everybody. Okay. So it's not only that these organs really had a pandemic in mind and prepared for it. Having said that, there were numerous indicators actually which were there in the last 4 5 years. Company after company, consultancy after consultancy, they went on publishing one survey after another, which showed changes in behavior and expectations of HCPs in terms of engagement. So when I say that, what I mean is that if you look at a common thread across these surveys, actually it was visible that the doctor's accessibility was declining, both in terms of time given to the reps and also in terms of frequency of visits they were giving to the reps. This is not only outside India, but actually there were a lot of surveys even representing India too. There was also an indication from a perspective that from the HCPs that they were wanting to explore other channels, or they had other preferred channels like emails, websites, and so on for seeking information. And companies proactively actually they understood this. They started building in a structure behind putting in technology and platforms in place to manage these expectations of the HCPs. So you had companies which went in and collected consents or e-permissions from the doctors for various channels. And they already started experimenting, reaching out to these customers. So one can say that the writing was on the wall, that yesterday's methods will not work tomorrow, but they were obviously not prepared for the pandemic. And COVID just accelerated the process. So when the companies already had built-in platforms and they were ready for something like rep-driven emails or rep video calls and so on, they were obviously able to use these platforms and channels more effectively because they had already experimented that. On the other side, the moment the pandemic happened, the other companies struggled predominantly because they did not want to get disengaged from their customers. So whatever was available, they quickly grasped onto these, actually maybe like WhatsApp messages, SMSs, telephone calls, and so on. Now, every channel has an objective and a capability actually. So if you don't use it effectively, obviously the channel objectives are not understood by the HCP, and channels like a WhatsApp or a SMS or a telephone call are not great channels in terms of delivering content. So obviously HCP was very wary of these channels, and you saw that content was not exactly the way which was delivered. So the second aspect which always people talk about is the content being the king, and the companies which could engage better were the ones who could deliver content in a better manner because they had platforms available to deliver those contents.
You have very well addressed. In fact, it reminded me of a quote which says, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And therefore, as you said, the writing was on the wall, and those who were proactive definitely benefited from this, like you benefited yourself. So it's always good to be proactive rather than to be reactive. So you will agree, Shashin, that at least for most of the field salespeople, at least some of their calls are over the phone or online. It's clear that virtual sales calls are fast becoming the norm. A recent social media survey showed, like you said, that many HCPs are finding the reps online or virtual calls annoying and an intrusion into their privacy, and therefore they express their unhappiness even on social media like Twitter. So, how can sales teams ensure that their virtual selling efforts are productive as in person meetings? What does it take to be remarkable, make memorable, and compelling sales call over the phone or virtual platforms?
First and foremost, I agree that the initial reaction from the HCPs and even associations, for that matter, there were quite a few doctor associations which went out on social media and shared that they don't want any SMSs or telephone calls or WhatsApp messages. Obviously, they considered, like you mentioned, intrusion of privacy, and they believe that these are channels which were till then for their private use,
Right.
were suddenly there was a digital explosion on that, and people did not want anybody to intrude over there. Moreover, in India, this gets accentuated predominantly because we have numerous companies with host of reps. We have multiple divisions. We have within divisions we have multiple sales teams, and obviously when all people try to reach out to the same HCP with a high level of brand reminders, actually high level of messages, actually it is really an explosion of digital reach to a doctor, and the obvious reaction is that please leave me alone. Okay, and it's not only the sales team which is responsible for this. The organizations themselves actually push the sales teams to some extent, and the sales teams were perplexed in terms of how to reach out. So everybody was completely work from home, and there was no other way to reach out except for this one. So they used whatever was available to them. So obviously there are many areas which the organization needs to work on in terms of not letting this happen. And making the sales rep effective. If you're looking at the sales rep being effective in terms of using digital channels, it is not a solitary responsibility of the sales team or a training team and so on. It starts right from the organization. Say, look at a marketing team and the process of segmentation and targeting, actually. And what we've been doing till today is we look at segmentation and targeting largely from potential and yield or adoption of a doctor, and then try and say that go to a doctor 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Some companies actually graduated to a next level and said, besides actually potential adoption, look at drivers and barriers and try and actually look at understanding the behavior of the customer and so on. The marketing now needs to look at actually with the kind of data which they have, the preference of channels and the type of content which our customer uses. So there are doctors which are happy with going to the websites, downloading PDF files. There are doctors which will be looking at video files. Actually, they're looking at webinars which are hosted on your websites. Actually, they look at a senior KOL within the country or outside the country. They would like to look at this kind of information. And digital somehow, unlike the face-to-face, actually, or rather it gives a footprint of the customer wherever he goes, and this data is easily accessible to the marketing team, and they need to analyze this data. So first and foremost, I believe that marketing has a role in terms of understanding this information and using it effectively. Then there is a lot of technology which is now available where a rep can be helped. So there are platforms which can suggest a rep to send a specific email to a doctor. There are artificial intelligence driven platforms also, but there would also be others actually which are automated, or maybe where you can load suggestions from the backside and work on them. So these are areas where marketing can help. The other aspect which one needs to understand is that each channel has an objective. So a SMS or a WhatsApp has a limited objective of possibly sending an URL for a website link or a webinar. A telephone call might have a limited objective of a reminder or inviting a doctor for a remote video call or something like that. And a remote video call is a platform where you can deliver the CLM content, actually, which can you can discuss science, you can discuss clinical studies. So again, use different channels, different platforms for different purposes. Okay, and this is something which marketing needs to keep in mind. Groom the rep with the help of the training team and manage that. The senior management or maybe the organization at large actually has to look at this as a process of change management. One of the important challenges which we have is that digital is considered to be highly mystified, and we need to get it demystified for the rep. The second aspect is that we need to make a rep believe that sense of insecurity which rep cultivates because of digital reach of the organization is misplaced, and we don't see that in future also the organizations can do without a rep. If digital is going to stay, it is going to be to the route where face to face and digital is going to be as a hybrid. The last piece actually which I see and which is possibly the most important is the piece where you're looking at training and the sales management actually overseeing execution. Now they both need to look at together actually how to work this out, and training needs to look at different aspects. So when I say different aspects, when I'm looking at the tech side of it, because the rep possibly may not be as tech savvy, how to use a laptop, how to send a video call link, how to invite a doctor, how to manage a connection if it is poor. Then there are the skills part of it actually in terms of managing a digital call. What happens if a doctor doesn't pick up a call, or how do you open a call, how to close a call, what kind of questions to ask. If a doctor doesn't open a mail, actually, do I go and ask him straight away, why did you not open my mail? There are obviously tailor-made approaches which one needs to create. Possibly you can create 1 to 2 minute videos, you can inculcate that good behavior on the basis of this kind of efforts. And I believe that overall wholesome effort by the entire organization can only help the rep in terms of managing the digital channels in a better manner. It's a long answer, but I believe that this possibly addresses your question completely.
Right, right. It's not just the rep who has to take responsibility for the change scenario and the response, but the entire organization has to be behind him, because at the end of the day, he is the person who meets the customer either physically or digitally, and both require different kind of skill sets and knowledge, and the organization has to now do a lot of retraining and reskilling, and marketing has a very big role to play now in making the rep more effective. And you made some very important points earlier on itself, is that by being proactive, you had done something like taking permissions from doctor to use them emails or their phone numbers. So kind of a permission marketing rather than the interruptive marketing that pharma is used to. So I think those are important takeaways for people to be proactive to take the doctor's permission. Because if you see in the non-digital or the face-to-face only interaction time, the doctor had a lot of control as to when he would meet the reps. He would even fix days, a particular day in a week, particular time, so that he could manage his interaction with the doctors within a given time frame. So when the digital happened because of the lockdown, I think people started calling doctor at any day or any time, and that must have really disrupted him, plus given his own change scenario of handling the COVID crisis. So going forward, I think those are very valuable suggestions that you have made, that everybody from the top management down to the line managers and marketing as well have to assist to make the rep feel comfortable and confident to use the digital channels effectively. So, with the market certainty out of the window for the foreseeable future, especially in pharma sales, sales leaders are still relying on age old KPIs. And we ran a quick poll to know whether there has been a shift in the KPIs. But what was heartening was a good 50+% said, though this was more like a dipstick poll, that 50% said, no, we have a more flexible KPIs now in the change scenario. So, what can be done to educate sales leaders to lean on the right set of KPIs and not be afraid to adapt them as they go?
It is very heartening to know, first and foremost, that your poll showed 50% of the organizations have adapted flexible KPIs. In fact, I also had reached out to quite a few colleagues and to understand how they look at KPIs within their organization. And I also had similar findings. So I'm happy that my sales team is being led by people who understand the current situation on the ground and are adopting newer ways to measure their efforts and their sincerity in the marketplace. Uh, I I would say that let's first look at not only KPIs, possibly look at how we evolved over a period of time. If you look at the creation of a territory or a creation of any headcount which comes and mans a territory, the age-old parameters of what is the kind of productivity of sales which was there in that area, the potential of that place, what is the kind of call load which is there in terms of potential doctors which are there, and which needs to be delivered, and how does it differ from the other territory, and accordingly we used to man the territory and then add people also on the basis of this formula. A new company, possibly an incumbent company, when comes in and puts people, they just look at competitor winning data. And if I am in diabetes, I look at my competitors in diabetes and look at if they have two people, I put two. Actually, if I want to match them, and if I want to have a higher per man head count, actually, which has been approved, then I can go in and put in three instead of two. Now, when this kind of perspectives were there in place, obviously what was happening is that the KPIs were worked out on the basis of what the call load was, the kind of number of calls which were being made at a doctor, and so on. So if I had 200 calls, and if I had lesser number of doctors, my frequency was increased actually to the same doctor, and so on. So I think this whole formula needs an overhaul. The old era is more or less over. Okay? So if people need to go forward, they need to look at this with a new perspective, because access by territory, by every single territory in India is very different today. Actually, doctors' accessibility in COVID and even going forward will be different. The digital preferences to channels also would be different, and that is the reason why my personal belief is that call loads actually should be looked at differently going forward, and we need to have tremendous amount of flexibility and variation available in terms of how we look at field force calls, open mails, click mails, how we look at video calls, and we look at composite actually something to deliver. It's a very complex process, but obviously one needs to look at it in a correct manner. This is the aspect which will add to flexibility and possibly lead to better because the rep will certainly believe that the company understands his territory in a much better manner. Having said that, if I have to go back and I have to actually look at COVID and then say that how did we set on the correct KPI? Obviously, it was a very difficult process, and we had almost every month we changed our KPIs. It was for short periods, and we went on evolving from month to month to get the right KPI which we have arrived at now. And this is, as I said, actually, which is a hybrid KPI with a mix of different channels, which allows flexibility to the rep. We also, and this is something which not only we would use, typically all sales organizations use this actually in different manners, but to get an optimum level of adoption of any new initiative, people float in a contest or a campaign and drive effort and or drive sales to the highest level possible, which helps you to arrive at a level which is possible by the field force or so. And that will tell you over a period of time. So if I run a contest or a 3 months, 6 months, then I'll understand that what is the exact level of hybrid KPIs which my field force will be able to deliver, which helps me to formulate a KPI going forward. This is a process we adopted, and I think it is working fine for us.
Great. So, what I'm hearing from you is that one needs to be flexible enough to adapt to the changes and understand what works and what doesn't work. And instead of being rigid, one has to be flexible and adapt new ways. This reminds me that when you said, the writing on the wall, and it was already very evident that the HCPs wanted a different kind of engagement and different kind of experience. So too with the KPIs, maybe they've been around for a long time based on the old parameters or old paradigms, and they need to shift. And this was also mentioned by Hanno Wolfram in his session on key account management in pharma. And Hanno Wolfram, incidentally, also worked with Boehringer Ingelheim for a long time. He was the area manager for Europe. So he said that this model has been in use for 40 years. It's high time we relooked at it, reinvented the whole thing, and changed our approach and looked at it more from the doctor's perspective as to what are his expectations from the pharma companies and how going forward we need to reshape our approach to the entire physician pharma relationship. So there is a phenomenal shift in the entire commercial team, especially marketing. You touched upon some points as to how marketing can support the sales team to deliver value to customers. So, what is the way to get marketing on the same page about which sales KPIs matter to achieving the overall business goals?
So the answer lies in the question itself. Okay, and let me state it in a different manner. The question is not really only what the sales force will be able to deliver, or what is the optimum number of doctors which they can reach, or what is the optimum number of calls which they can make, or what is the optimum number of engagements they can reach with various channels. The real question which the BUHs and the sales leaders actually or marketing teams need to ask is that what is the kind of effort which is required to engage customers and ensure that your every single patient who is the right patient for your drug gets your drug. Okay. Right. How do you ensure that your business goals are achieved actually, and what is the kind of effort which would be required? That is the real question actually that needs to be answered. Now, as far as actually the adopting of the new KPIs are concerned, actually the crisis itself has given us a great opportunity to experiment. And if we, like Winston Churchill has said, actually, if we let this crisis go waste, then possibly, God help us, we cannot wait for another crisis to help us in terms of looking at the future. So this current opportunity gives you a chance to experiment. If you still don't have the courage to experiment it completely, you can always do pilots in few areas, look at controlled territories where only face-to-face is implemented. There are others where you can look at digital engagements and face-to-face. However, actually, very simply put, actually, 1 + 1 is always more than 1. So I cannot see a situation where digital plus face to face can be less than face to face alone. It will always be more. The other aspect is that your face to face has already become so limited in terms of access, in terms of amount of time, in terms of amount of the visits which are there. You're not able to deliver your optimum content to your customers. So why would you not use channels which can give you that great amount of effectiveness to deliver content to your customer? More so because digital reach comes at a much significantly lesser cost than many other say face-to-face initiatives which we do.
Great. I think so. The number one challenge is a shift in our mindset that we need to make rather than hoping that things will return back to the old normal and get used to this. And therefore, as you rightly said in your webinar, the new KPIs for the new normal. So this is a very interesting quote that always has been there. What gets measured gets done, and the what really matters. So designing the right set of KPIs means charting the right course vis-a-vis the important business objectives. At the same time, having flexibility in linking the reps' efforts to KPIs is something new, especially for primary care or mass market sales forces. So tell us your experience as to how are such concepts helping to deliver results.
So, like I said earlier, we have obviously worked on evolution of KPIs over a period of time. Okay, and that is the reason why we've been possibly able to measure actually from the very beginning and deliver as per what we have set as goals from a very beginning. Now, what gets measured gets delivered actually is obviously true from a perspective also that we have to set a right set of KPIs before even the months begin or before even you embark on a new journey actually, which like you said, 50% of the companies have already set a new set of KPIs, the flexible ones, and which are already good enough for them to go ahead. We measure that actually, and like I said earlier, we have all kinds of analytics in place where we can look at not only face-to-face channel, but we look at the amount of time, the open mails, we click mails, the amount of time person actually reaches on the website, what is the amount of time person spends on a registered website. So we look at all these analytics. We regularly give a feedback to the reps. There are two sets actually of digital initiatives which we have. Obviously, one which are driven by HO and one which are driven by field force. And we give them a feedback on whatever which is driven by the field force and drive those KPIs on a month-to-month basis. So, and that is the reason why we have a month-on-month evolution where we have reached an optimum level of adoption.
Great, wonderful. So pivoting on the go is the key word, and you have to use whatever skills you've acquired, experience you've acquired to address the new challenges to remain effective going forward. Finally, the last question. The majority of sales force have reported loss of earnings, especially incentives and maybe even the daily allowances. Will the new KPIs help the sales force earn incentive or make it more difficult? Your views and your suggestions.
So I'm not sure why this has happened. Okay, and that's the reason. So I would possibly not be able to comment on the entire pharma industry why this would have happened, because sales incentives are normally linked to efforts, and if the companies have modified KPIs and they have been empathetic enough with the rep in terms of understanding what is going on in the marketplace, and if the evaluation criteria or the qualifying criteria have been modified accordingly, then possibly this should not have happened. Okay. Having said that, if sales goals are not achieved and people have lost incentives, then this is a little different perspective to look at. However, here also, what I've been made to understand by many organizations is that organizations have come back and either reduced sales targets, or actually they have looked at qualifying criteria for earning incentives and looked at it in an empathetic manner too. So my understanding is that the new set of KPIs should not really make any impact whatsoever in terms of incentives of the sales force, unless and until you have a set of KPIs which are obviously completely not achievable, or for that matter, you just announce the kind of KPIs, but you don't have a method or a process to reach out how to achieve that. So, which we talked about in terms of change management, or in terms of training, or in terms of the marketing team supporting that. Give an example, I might want a rep to send 4 emails a month to a consented doctor. Okay. However, my marketing team does not have adequate amount of content available in terms of delivery. Now, if that is the kind of challenges which one rep faces, obviously he or she is not responsible for non-achievement of KPIs. So the organization as a whole needs to work towards it, and I don't see, if that happens, that there should be a challenge in terms of anybody losing their incentives because of new KPIs. They might lose it because of achievement of non-achievement of sales, and which is obviously given that if one does not achieve the business goals as expected by the organization, one should not even expect the kind of incentives which one would have otherwise got.
Great. So those are wonderful perspectives and great learnings from you, Sachin, that we need to be flexible at the same time. There are some hard realities brought in by this challenge, because we can see from the sales figures as well that there are quite a few companies which have not been able to hit the numbers. But I think there's a lot of lessons from both your webinar and the session that pharma people will find it very useful as to how they can adapt to the change scenario and take this as the new normal and begin to think empathetically. I think if somebody was empathetic in the pre-COVID era, digital is not going to disrupt your empathy. It's only going to make you more empathy. So I think you need empathy for the field force. You need empathy for the doctors as well going forward, which has been brought out very well by Deep Bhandari and Rajesh Tiwari in the earlier sessions. In fact, Rajesh began his session with a very nice quote from the book Road Less Traveled by Dr. Scott Peck, which says that life is difficult, the opening sentence. So that really catches you. But he says, what do you do once you accept the fact that life is difficult? You can either throw up your hands, or then you can say, well, let me become a little more competent. And therefore, what is it that I need to do? So I think everybody has to reskill, re-equip, and change their mindsets. And that has been a wonderful learning from you, Sachin. So thank you so much. Really grateful to you for sharing your thoughts, your perspectives, and also I think the very fact that Indian Pharma has produced such wonderful sales leaders like you, and there are many more who are there on our platform as well, itself should be very heartening going forward, that we will overcome this crisis as well. So thank you, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Anup. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity. Wish you also the very best.